And we're off and running on the Krug Show. Sunday morning, August the 18th, 9:09 a.m. West Coast, 9 minutes afternoon in the East. And Chase Sr. in his, not in his normal spot, but with us on the weekend. Normally we visit with Chase on Fridays, but Fridays in training camp have been busy, so he is kind enough to join us today on game day. And, of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle. Go get some brisket chili. Say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them that Krug sent you. And Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles, 205 Cypress Avenue, Pacific Grove, California. Anthony Catania is at 831-521-5264. And this live stream is sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. And we'll tell you more about them in a bit. Chase Sr.'s in the house. Chase, how are you?
Doing awesome. It's a game day. Looking forward to seeing some of these starters play tonight, Sunday night football. Probably going to get a drive or two, and obviously some starters not going to play in this game, but it's headlined by Brock Purdy, who is most likely going to get the start. So that'll be interesting to watch, and then hopefully we continue to see the emergence of some of these young players, and there are some positional battles as well that are still getting worked out throughout training camp in the preseason in the lead up to week 1 against the Jets, which is quickly approaching, and Brandon Ayuk still hasn't signed a deal.
Yeah, well, we'll get to Ayuk in a minute. What do you make of Purdy? He didn't play in the last game. A lot of people don't think he's going to play in the third game against the Raiders. How much does he need to play? How much do you need to see tonight?
I'm glad that Kyle Shanahan is playing him in addition to some of the starters. I'm always an advocate for starters playing at some point in the preseason. I think that you cannot replicate live game reps, live game action, and the flow of the game. And I think it's really important to shake off that rust a little bit. Look at how Andy Reid approaches the preseason for the Kansas City Chiefs, and they're going for 3 consecutive Super Bowls. He played his starters in week 1, played his starters in week 2, and they've played a lot. And they have very physical training camp practices. That has always been what Andy Reid has done throughout training camp and in the preseason. And it gets his teams mentally and physically ready for the rigors of the regular season. And then come playoff time, they are battle tested. So for the 49ers, you didn't play your starters week 1 because nearly a third of the 90-man roster was hurt going into that game against Tennessee. And you're going to play your starters tonight, and you didn't have the opportunity to take on the New Orleans Saints in these joint practices. And so you've been going up against your team, if you're the number ones for the Niners, all throughout training camp. Now you can face another team, knock off some of that rust, get that continuity going, and start to get into a little bit of a flow.
What did you take away from the Titans game? The 49ers lost that game in Nashville. What was your primary takeaway from that one?
I was very intrigued by what Dominic Pooney did. I know that Pro Football Focus didn't grade him highly in the run game, but then I went back and watched the tape with the NFL Plus account, and I saw that he was pancaking some of the Titans' number 1 defensive linemen. And I thought that he actually performed well in the run game. And that's where Pro Football Focus can kind of mislead people from time to time. And I really like what PFF does, but sometimes the eye test is more telling than the Pro Football Focus grades. And then in the pass game, Dominic Pooney didn't give up a pressure. He didn't give up a quarterback hit. I love the pull block along the goal line on that Jordan Mason touchdown run, and then he helped carry Mason into the end zone. So really like what Pooney did in that game, and it's just working off the momentum of him, most likely, in my opinion, being the team's starting right guard week 1 against the New York Jets. I know that D. Winters wasn't really graded highly by Pro Football Focus, but I'm not necessarily looking for high PFF grades throughout the preseason. I'm looking at the eye test and what do my eyes tell me. I'm not going to nerd out with some of these analytical numbers. What I see from D. Winters is a player who's always making disruptive plays, plays the game the right way, with his hair on fire. He's aggressive. He's physical. He has no fear. He was recruited to TCU as a safety. he has shown that athleticism and that pursuit speed. And I know that sometimes that aggressiveness leads to him over pursuing in moments, but there's a foundation in which you can work with there with D Winners. I want to see more from Jalen Graham because he's had a good training camp. And in the last two preseasons, I think that he's performed very well. Tonight, I hope that he gets extended run because the Niners are deep at linebacker. They have questions at that position with Dre Greenlaw still coming off that torn Achilles. And Dre Greenlaw is on an expiring deal. And this youth movement, while it might be a tough decision, might help the Niners in a way where they move off of Dre Greenlaw with the very expensive roster. And then you put Jalen Graham, D Winners into that linebacker rotation and you replenish the cupboard a little bit as far as your youth talent. I was intrigued by the backup quarterback play. I had huge concerns about Brandon Allen and Josh Dobbs. I thought they performed very well. Brandon Allen isn't known to have a strong arm. I thought he threw us some zip, some precision. He threw two really nice deep balls downfield. Unfortunately for him, both were dropped, but they were tight window throws. One to Tay Martin, one to Ronnie Bell. Him pushing the ball downfield, I think, is a really good sign. And then Josh Dobbs is always going to make good improvisational plays, and he can thrive out of structure. The question with him, can he play on time? Can he play within structure? Sometimes he struggles there, but I thought he made good plays on the touchdown run out of structure, and then he showed a good command of the offense. Jordan Mason is this team's second best running back. I don't even think it's close. I love the physicality and the aggressiveness in which he runs with. 5.7 yards per carry on that first drive. He's so physical, and I love the boom that he brings to the running back room. And I think San Francisco has to manage the carries for Christian McCaffrey a little bit better. And Elijah Mitchell's always hurt. So I'm done with talking about Elijah Mitchell being injured. Jordan Mason is a really good player, maybe the most improved player throughout training camp for the Niners alongside Diamador Lenore. So those were a couple of takeaways that I had. The third down defense was terrible, but it's the preseason. Backup defensive tackle, especially with the Kalia Davis injury, and backup edge are concerns for me. So I think the Niners might scour the waiver market or look to make a trade there. But those are some takeaways I had from that preseason opener and some things that I'll be looking out for tonight.
Yeah, I thought Kalia Davis was really impressive. I mean, that was the best I've ever seen Kalia Davis play.
Yeah.
And then he's hurt. He's out for half the year. I mean, that was a rough break. I thought Brandon Allen looked pretty good. You know, I feel better about Brandon Allen being the QB2. I agree. Jordan Mason just keeps doing what Jordan Mason always seems to do, which is run for 5.5 yards a carry and look really impressive. Doing it, I thought some of the receivers looked good. Tay Martin, Trent Taylor, Chris Conley, Tongus, the rookie from Cal, I thought played pretty well. So overall, I thought Tatum Bethune was another guy who was around the football a lot. Curtis Robinson and Tatum Bethune kind of stuck out to me. Malik Mustafa, clearly, anytime you turn on the film, he really stands out. I mean,
he's a dog.
He just absolutely stands out every single time. Okay, there's a report coming out of Tampa that the Buccaneers are going to release linebacker Randy Gregory, according to Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times, the former Niner. Very short stay for Gregory in Tampa. Cowboys took him in the draft. He went to Denver. Denver traded him to the Niners. And then he signed with Tampa 1 year, $3 million deal on April 4th. Didn't show up to minicamp, had not shown up at training camp. Anyway, what do you think? Did Randy Gregory do enough last year to make you say, well, you don't have Drake Jackson, why not?
I thought that Randy Gregory was a decent rotational edge rusher, and the 49ers, of course, signed him late in the process. And with the Niners last year, he was able to turn in 2.5 sacks. He had one with Denver, released by Denver. Niners pick him up because they had a need at the edge rusher spot. And here we are, August 18th, in the lead up to the regular season, and the Niners have a need for an edge rusher once again because they are light as far as depth goes there. And then some of their depth options are unknown commodities. Yetur Gross-Matos has a lot of ability. The physical traits are certainly there, but he's never really popped with the Carolina Panthers up to this point. I do think that Chris Kosarek's going to be able to bring the best out of him as that Arden Key, Charles Omenihu type of player who can play a little bit of hybrid defensive tackle and defensive end. But as a former second-round pick, he hasn't fully put it together. You have Robert Beal, who's a really good athlete, didn't really do much last week in that preseason game against Tennessee. And Randy Gregory is a player who, when he's been on the straightened path, he's been a pretty productive player. The thing with Randy Gregory, he's gotten in trouble a lot. He's had some off-the-field issues. He signs this deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as you mentioned, and then he just doesn't show up to training camp. And Todd Bowles wasn't given a reason for why he didn't show up to training camp. So I'm not sure if something has happened with Randy Gregory where he's running into some personal situations again, or some off the field situations which have kind of hindered him and kept him back from fully breaking out. But he is a player who was drafted very high by the Dallas Cowboys back in 2015 in the second round, and he has had some pretty good production from time to time. If the Niners are able to bring in a player like that, they have to make sure, what's the deal? Because any player who plays for the 49ers will tell you that Kyle Shanahan is all about ball. You have to take your job very, very seriously. And this team is about culture. And if you don't fit into that type of culture and you don't fit into that type of mindset, you're not going to have an opportunity to play for the San Francisco 49ers. So they have to get to the root cause of why he didn't show up to Buccaneers training camp. Why was there no reason given? He does have scheme familiarity and team familiarity with San Francisco, but I think they would pass on the opportunity to bring him in just because it's kind of a weird situation and it doesn't really fall in line with what the Niners organization is all about, because they really do value character.
A lot of people feel like Demo Lenore has been the MVP of 49er camp. I know you're not there at every practice and you're not, you're covering this thing virtually, but you saw the preseason game, and I know you're following the headlines day to day. Who would you, if you had to throw a vote outside of Lenore for MVP of Niner training camp, who would you go with?
Yeah, Deommodore Lenoir has really stolen the headlines as far as being the MVP of Niners training camp, and it's a huge year for him. It's a contract year, and it's going to be interesting to see what position the Niners have him playing. Is he going to be outside corner? Is he going to play in the slot? If he plays in the slot, I think he's one of the best slot corners in the entire National Football League. I know that you talked about this week on your show how he went on the Richard Sherman podcast and talked about how he approached Steve Wilkes about wanting to play inside in the Super Bowl, and he feels as though that may have cost the Niners an opportunity to halt that Chiefs offense and kept them from winning that game. He can thrive and flourish outside or inside. On the inside, obviously, he's not going to be paid as much as he would if he were to play very well on the outside at an elite level, because that is a position that just draws a higher price tag. So the fact that he is willing to play both positions, I think, is great. This is a player who in the 3 previous years, all 3 years he's been in the NFL, he's given up a combined 4 touchdowns in coverage. He's good against the run, good against the pass. He has gone up against some upper echelon wide receivers, and in drawing those assignments, he's played very well. And it's not easy to play inside outside. So the fact that he continues to do that, have that positional versatility, and continues to play really well, he's one of my breakout candidates this year as far as a player who I think could make that jump in the interception department, Pro Bowl department, and maybe become an all-pro player in this league if he plays on the inside. I don't think he's quite capable of being an all-pro guy on the outside. So he's the MVP, as you mentioned, throughout Niners training camp. I think there are a couple of other players who you want to throw into that mix. Jordan Mason is just such an improved commodity, and I think that he has worked his way into the running back rotation where he should be RB2 for this football team. regardless of when Elijah Mitchell comes back, regardless of what Isaac Guerrero can do as the hamstring injuries continue to really limit him, because those have been problems for him, high school, college, and now at the pro level. Jordan Mason is a really talented running back, and he's worked on the pass catching. He's been able to work out differences with Bobby Turner, who he said early in his career he kind of butted heads with a little bit. So that's a player that comes to mind. And then Deebo Samuel has been dominating throughout training camp. He has come in better shape. He has come in motivated. He is slimmed down. And because of that, he looks faster, has played faster, and he looks to be a motivated player, knowing that after this year, he has no more guaranteed money left on his deal. And I think that with the whole Brandon Ayuk situation, for Deebo to come in and be this team's number one throughout training camp is a testament to how he approaches the game of football, how he's using that Super Bowl game as means for motivation to improve. I still don't think that he's the greatest route runner or true traditional outside wide receiver, but if he can stay healthy and he's in better shape, I think that he can turn back the clock back to that 2021 season and have a dominant campaign for San Francisco. And the Niners have needed him to be available, to be in shape, and to play better. And he's approached training camp the right way. He's not complaining about the contract. He's not complaining about the trade rumors. He said earlier this offseason, look, the Niners approached me and my agent. They said there were trade discussions happening. He knows that the harsh reality is if the Niners sign Brandon Ayuk to a long-term contract extension, given the increasing price tag of this roster, this time next year, he might not be on this team. He's worried about 2024 and trying to win a Super Bowl championship. He's now been to 2 Super Bowls. He's seen the other team's confetti falling down. And I think that he has just crushed this offseason with partaking in almost every practice and playing very well.
Yeah, I would say it's a short list. I would say Jair Brown has looked really, really good. And then Demo for sure on defense. On offense, I would say definitely Debo has looked really good. Then there's guys who have looked good for a day, a day here, a day there. But I would say Mason and Debo on offense and Lenore and Jair on defense. Those would be the guys. And maybe a little bit of D. Winters, who's flying around making a ton of plays.
And Pooney and Mustafa have been awesome.
Yeah, Pooney and Mustafa, the rookie class.
MVP level, but the fact that you're getting early returns on your draft investments and you're able to have some players with some intrigue and potential that you're seeing right away from this draft class, I think those are important developments for the entirety of this organization.
All right, let's get to Brandon Ayuk. Debo said he's going to be on this team. A lot of people feel like he's going to be a Niner now. Are the people that are worried about Ayuk moving on to the Steelers, are those people in the clear? And we just don't know the details on his deal with the Niners? Or do you think Ayuk to the Steelers is a possibility? I mean, they looked so bad. I watched that game last night, Steelers, Bills, and man, Russell Wilson looked really, really, really bad. I mean, really bad. And then, if I'm Brandon Ayuk and I'm watching that game, I'm thinking Russell Wilson looked bad. Greg Rousseau dominated Broderick Jones. So it's like my premier protection just got dominated. My quarterback doesn't look like much. Do I really want to leave Shanahan and Purdy and all these weapons in the West Coast for the Steelers? What is your what's the latest on Ayuk? What are you hearing?
I thought the same exact thing in watching that game last night. And I own real estate in Steeler fans' head right now because they're trying to tell me, Chase, it's only the preseason. Kenny Pickett during the preseason last year played and performed phenomenally. The Steelers look like Super Bowl contenders. You can't say that the Steelers aren't going to have a good offensive team this year because it's only the preseason. You know what my response to that is? I've watched Russell Wilson the last 3 years. Russell Wilson is a declining quarterback in this league, and he's gotten progressively worse the last 3 years. The Denver Broncos are paying Russell Wilson $35 million to play somewhere else. Sean Payton hated him so much that they're paying him that much money to play for another team in the AFC. And I trust Sean Payton's evaluation of the quarterback position. Moving on from Russ, I've watched Justin Fields the last 2 years. I'm very confident that Justin Fields just does not have it. Now, did he go to a great situation to start his career in Chicago? No. And that probably damaged his confidence a little bit. But the last 2 years that Justin Fields has been the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears, he has struggled to complete 60% of his passes. That is well below league average. He has no feel. He has no touch over the middle area of the field. He's an insanely quick and intriguing athlete, but the accuracy wanes. He can't complete balls from sideline to sideline at all 3 levels. And Russell Wilson is a player who I've watched over the last 3 years get worse and worse and worse. And he's become so conservative. That Russell Wilson long ball, the Russell Wilson moon ball, used to be one of the best throws in the NFL because he could loft that ball downfield, perfectly lead his receiver, and drop it right in the bucket in stride. But now Russell Wilson is a check down merchant. So if Brandon Ayuk is watching that game, you really want to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers and you want to have either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields as your quarterback. Mike Tomlin has not won a playoff game since 2016. If that were Kyle Shanahan, he'd be canned. If Mike Tomlin were coaching in Philadelphia, he would have been out of there 3 years ago. But the Steelers as an organization are very conservative, and Mike Tomlin is a really good football coach. I'd frankly like to play for him. I know that he's had a lot of high-level success. He has a Lombardi trophy. Kyle Shanahan does not. But what have you done for me lately? The Niners have made it to 4 NFC titles and 2 Super Bowls in 5 years. Kyle Shanahan has won a lot of big games during that stretch. He's one of the best offensive minds alongside Andy Reid of this century. And the Niners are a team that are firmly entrenched in the Super Bowl window right now. The Pittsburgh Steelers have not won a playoff game in nearly 8 years. Mike Tomlin hasn't been able to get offensive coordinator right over the last several years. And I know that Arthur Smith did some great things with Ryan Tannehill and maximizing his abilities when he was the OC for the Tennessee Titans. But do you remember those Tennessee Titans offenses as high octane, exciting offenses to watch? No, they were run-centric offenses that relied heavily on Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill to make plays from time to time through the air, and then he made plays with his legs from time to time. And it's not like the Tennessee Titans had a lot of high-level playoff success. They had regular season success. There was 1 year in which they were the number 1 seed in the AFC, but then they got bounced in their first playoff game in the divisional round. So if I'm Brandon Ayuk, you want to leave a perfectly great situation where you have Kyle Shanahan, Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Trent Williams, and a loaded offensive weaponry, and you have a really good defense. And according to reports now, the San Francisco 49ers are offering you $30 million per year. If you're getting $28 to $30 million per year and you can stay with the Niners, you can put up great numbers, you can play in an offensive system that's going to lead to a lot of open looks because of the complementary players that you have around you. You can be happy and win because winning is fun. You can continue to grow your brand from one of the most iconic logos in all of sports, and you're still going to get paid very, very handsomely. And you know what you get with San Francisco. You go to Pittsburgh, it is a wild card. You don't know what you're getting. You don't know who your quarterback's going to be next year. You don't know who your quarterback is going to be in week 4. If Russell Wilson flops, they go to Justin Fields. Do you have confidence that Justin Fields is going to be able to get you the football consistently, accurately? Kyle Shanahan's always going to put you in a position to succeed. Brock Purdy has allowed Brandon Ayuk to become an all-pro player in this league. We finally saw what Shanahan's offense can look like with a legitimate deep threat. Ayuk has every single route to his route tree. I think that he could be featured more in this offense moving forward. So if I'm Brandon Ayuk, I'm looking at Pittsburgh last night and I'm saying, whew, Grass
No
ain't always
thanks.
greener on the other
Yeah.
side. I got to return to San Francisco here.
Well, it's funny. Kev and I were talking about this, and it's like, you just Russ. The one thing that translates from college to the pros with quarterbacks is sacks. If you take sacks in college, you're gonna be sacked in the pros.
Yeah.
Taking sacks has less to do with your ability to run away and more about your ability to process and kind of compartmentalize in your mind, like when to leave, when to abandon the pocket, how long to stick it out. And Justin Fields, despite the 4.4 flat 40, was sacked a ton at Ohio State, and that's
with
continued
Chicago
in the pros. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I Russell Wilson's broken, and Justin Fields just doesn't see it, and you're gonna go there, and seriously, play opposite a guy in George Pickens who already says that he's the number one guy. I kind of think Ayuk's better than Pickens. So it's like,
for sure.
You're going to walk into a room where Pickens thinks he's the number one guy, despite the fact he's a diva and won't block. They don't have a quarterback short term. They don't have a quarterback long term. There's really, really high expectations of that franchise. And they, as you said, we're coming up on a decade the last time they've won a playoff game. So be careful what you wish for.
Here's the other thing, too. The AFC North is a gauntlet.
Right.
And the Pittsburgh Steelers have, for sure, the worst offense in that division. And you're playing in a tough, rugged, physical division against Baltimore, against Cleveland, against Cincinnati. And they have their quarterbacks in place. The Pittsburgh Steelers do not. And at some point, this organization in Pittsburgh has been carried by their defense. There has to be a defensive regression. And they're going to play in a lot of games this year in which they're winning or losing 16-13, 17-14. They're going to be on the wrong side of a lot of 20-13 ball games. So you can love Mike Tomlin as much as you want. And I have mad respect for Mike Tomlin. That Steelers organization, fantastic. They have 6 Lombardi trophies. The Niners have 5. They're 2 blue bloods in the National Football League. But the Niners, and you can't deny this, are a better football situation by far as compared to Pittsburgh, and they have owned the NFC West over the last couple of years. And I know the Rams are a really good team, but San Francisco should still be this year and in the future the number one team in the NFC West for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Ian Sharp says Steelers might take Dobbs. They already had Dobbs.
Yeah.
Everybody's had Dobbs at some point. What do you think? I mean, the talk is from Garofalo that the Niners have caved and are sitting right there at $30 million. Did the Niners mishandle this thing? I mean, if you're going to go to $30 million, shouldn't you have gone there well before the middle of August?
I think so. And you and I have kind of been in agreement that this situation has been weird. It's been long and windy. It's been contentious. It's been arduous. Those are words that John Lynch used the other day when he was on the radio on KNBR. And you think about the news cycle of this. Every day, there seems to be a new update. Every day, there seems to be new movement. When the wide receiver market got reset on multiple occasions months ago, we were saying the price tag for Brandon Ayuk continues to go up. Wide receiver deal happens. The price tag for Brandon Ayuk just went up again. They offered him about $26 million earlier in the spring. They did not move off that offer for months. Just this past week, Garofalo reporting that the Niners finally increased their offer. You and I were talking about this months ago, literally, that the Niners are going to have to pay more. And I had some of these people who cover the Niners responding on X and throwing out some posts on X saying, this doesn't mean that Brandon Ayuk is going to be due more money. The Niners can still have him at their price tag. No.
The
Because
Niners have
Brandon
all the
Ayuk,
leverage. How many times did we hear that this
right.
offseason?
And look, the Niners still have some leverage here just because of the 5th-year option and the ability to franchise tag Brandon Ayuk. But look, this is just simple financials, right? Like, players at his position have reset the market on multiple occasions. It started with Calvin Ridley, and we have seen a litany of wide receivers get paid and reset the market. And Ayuk, when he goes to the negotiating table, can say, I am the Niners' number 1 wide receiver. I was an all-pro. I'm one of the best route runners in the NFL. I'm one of the best run-blocking wide receivers in the entire NFL. If I had CD Lamb or Amon-Ra St. Brown targets, I would put up crazy production and I would be more expensive. I've made sacrifices for this team. And if Justin Jefferson's going to get $35 million, I'm not that, but I'm damn near around $30 million. 28 to 30 is kind of that happy zone. And so the Niners have botched this because we're sitting here August 18th, and months ago we were saying if the Niners give him 28, TJ Houshmandzadeh even said that. He's his private wide receivers coach, that Ayuk would have taken $28 million a long while ago. But the Niners were so stubborn because they want to win this negotiation that they didn't move off that price. And now they've waited and waited and waited, and now they finally feel the pressure. John Lynch saying the other day, we feel the urgency of needing to pay Brandon Ayuk. This thing could have been wrapped up a while ago. Ayuk could have been on the field weeks ago to start training camp, and they could be working toward the goal at hand, which is trying to win a Super Bowl. Now, I know you still have ample time with a couple of weeks left to go until the regular season, but we saw how poorly Nick Bosa played that first month. He was not the same dominant Nick Bosa. The pressure and quarterback hit numbers were still great, but he wasn't sacking the quarterback and finishing because he wasn't acclimated to game speed. He hadn't practiced. He's still a physical freak who was able to play on that Sunday after signing that deal on that Wednesday. But you can't replicate practices and live game reps and offensive continuity. This is a very complex scheme. You want Brock Purdy to be able to have Brandon Ayuk on the field. You want to be able to figure out what your offense is, gauge the temperature of it, the feeling of that side of the ball. And so now you're going to be trying to get Ayuk up to speed, acclimating him this late in the process when you could have had this thing wrapped up a while ago.
How much do you think the newfound 11th hour 49er front office urgency has to do with the fact that Cowing and Pearsall are fucking glass, and these guys can't go through 3 practices without, wearing a blue jersey or sitting out?
Huge issue, because Brandon Ayuk, since he came into the league, I know he was injured a little bit year 1, but keep in mind that was the COVID year. No preseason games, limited training camp practices, yet he still led the team in receiving. Since that year, he has been durable, he has been reliable, he has been tough, and he has barely missed any time. And he has gotten better, literally statistically and with the eye test on tape, every single year that he's been in the NFL. And so when you can count on a player like that who's truly elite, who you envision becoming an all-pro, and he's become that all-pro, and he's a great weapon for your young franchise quarterback in Brock Purdy, can't let that guy walk, especially when he wants to come back and he wants to be with your organization. And then you draft a couple of wide receivers here back in April, and Ricky Pearsall has had a shoulder injury and a hamstring injury. Jacob Cowing got hurt right away. Now, those 2 young players have shown flashes, but moving off of Brandon Ayuk is such a massive risk. And the timeline now of moving off of him just simply does not make sense, because you're in this Super Bowl window and the Pittsburgh Steelers are said to not be giving up any players or not willing to give up any players. How does an Ayuk trade help you right now? It's another reason why San Francisco kind of fumbled the situation.
Right. Because the Niners had to get, once the draft came and went, the Niners had to get players that could contribute this year. Otherwise, they lose the deal.
Yep.
I think the 49ers came to camp this summer intent on trading Brandon Ayuk, only to find that Pearsall and Cowing were not ready, and that that they really badly needed Ayuk. I mean, I think that if Pearsall and Cowing had monster camps and Ayuk had held out, I think Ayuk somewhere else. But instead, Ayuk held in, which changes the dynamic because there he's there in your presence in all the meetings. And it's like you can't say, guys, we're going to go, you've heard it in past holdouts where the coach or the GM gets pissed off and after a certain point goes, guys, you know what? We're just going to go with who's here. All right, we're just going to focus on who's here. We're not going to focus on who's not here. We're just going to focus on who's here. And that it gives them like a nice rallying pivot point to say, fuck the holdout. But when you hold in and the guy's sitting there at the meeting, then in a lot of ways he's speaking like, the old saying, I am where my feet are. In a lot of ways, it's a very strong indicator that, one, I don't want to be fined, but two, I have some interest in being here because I am here.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I just feel like if Pearsall and Cowing had played awesome, and if he had held out, they would have been real easy to trade him. They played bad. He held in. Suddenly, a trade became very, very difficult, borderline impossible to get fair value. What do you think?
Yeah, and the other thing too is that the Niners have seemed unsure about what to do going all the way back to April, and I guess after the Super Bowl. They didn't trade Ayuk before the draft, yet they were taking calls on him and Deebo Samuel. And then, and we knew that the time to trade Ayuk was before the draft so that you get draft compensation and or players back. And then your plan of attack for how to replace Brandon Ayuk. And you get picks back that can help you right now, or players back that can help you right now, right? But then what San Francisco did, they didn't trade Deebo, they didn't trade Ayuk, but then they drafted 2 wide receivers in the draft. And I just think that was a confusing way to kind of go about this whole situation because
there's only so many roster spots.
There's only so many roster spots. And now what do the Niners do at wide receiver if they bring Ayuk back both this year and in the future? Now, are you going to cut a Chris Conley who has special teams value, a Ronnie Bell who has special teams value, Trent Taylor who's had a good camp, also has special teams value? You're probably going to have to move on from Danny Gray, who has done zilch since being a 3rd-round pick a few years ago. And now you have this kind of jumbled mess at the wide receiver spot. And then as you look ahead to like next year, you're going to have to decide on Deebo. And then if you let go of Deebo, you're going to be relying on Ricky Pearsall or Jacob Cowing to assume this large role for this team. And there's going to be a little bit of a reset offensively. So it's just such a wild situation when you think about the daily news cycle of it, all of the changes, the wild ride that this has been, the differences in reporting. And now this week, more than ever this offseason, it's looked as though the Niners are moving in a direction where they're going to bring Ayuk back. He wants to come back. He's always wanted to come back. They've agreed on a lot of the key elements of a deal. He has returned back to training camp practice for the first time in a couple of weeks. He's looked engaged and as part of the team. He's doing sprints on the side field. You have Mike Garafolo saying that if they're able to really work out some of the finer nuances of a deal, it's going to get done. Yesterday, you have Jeremy Fowler saying it's 60-40. He's going to come back to the Niners. You have reports that the Niners have upped their offer to $30 million, but Ayuk wants to figure out that last year of the deal. This all could have been avoided so long ago, and just get rid of this drama, start playing football, start practicing football, because you have this wonderful opportunity to finally get over the hump. Brandon Ayuk helps you get there. And these are things that we've been talking about for so long, yet here we are, and he's still unsigned. It's just kind of ridiculous at this point.
And you're right, absolutely right about the receiver room. I mean, it's what a mess. I mean, so it's talent. It's a lot of talent, right? You got Ayuk and Deebo and JJ. Okay, now you have Pearsall, who's your 1st-round pick. You have Cowing, who's your 4th-round pick. Cowing's just had a really good couple days of practice this last week. But then, so now if, you're going to keep 6 wide receivers, okay, if you keep 6, maybe you keep Chris Conley, who's become a leader and a special team player. But that, that still means you're cutting Ronnie Bell, K. Martin, Trent Taylor, Danny Gray, Robbie Chosen, John Trey Kirkland. You're cutting all those guys. And then maybe that's fine. But maybe there's a trade there. Maybe they could get a 7th round pick for Ronnie Bell. Maybe they could get if Danny Gray busted out in these last 2 preseason games. Maybe somebody wants a vertical threat. One, how many receivers do you think they'll carry? Is Cowing a lock to make it? And then I read a Bleacher Report article the other day talking about guys who they think could be traded or cut in each camp. And one of the names on that list was Tutu Atwell. And if the Niners are really looking for a complementary vertical threat, they've got JJ and Debo and Ayuk, and they just drafted Pearsall. And, but if they want that vertical threat, Cowing could give it to you. I mean, but so could Tutu Atwell. And maybe Tutu Atwell could be even better. What do you think? I mean, if Atwell is available, would you rather have Jacob Cowing, a rookie from Arizona, or would you rather have Tutu Atwell?
Well, that's part of the problem with what the Niners have done here, is that they've put themselves in a corner with their uncertainty in their decision making, right? And you think about, if Ayuk comes back, which wide receivers make the team? You're going to have Ayuk, Debo, Jawan Jennings, and Ricky Pearsall. Those 4 guaranteed to make the team. You can't cut a 4th round pick in Jacob Cowing, who has flashed at moments throughout training camp and earlier in the spring. So if you cut him, I don't think he's going to clear waivers. So just because of where he was drafted and the flashes that he's shown, he has to make the team as your number 5, but he doesn't offer you special teams value, which then brings you to the 6 wide receiver spot. I don't think that you're going to hold on to 7, and you need some special teams value from a wide receiver. Chris Conley gives you that. So that's 6 right there, which means you're going to have to let go or trade Ronnie Bell, who I think is a solid player, who also gives you special teams value as a returner. Danny Gray, who is a former 3rd round pick. Trent Taylor, who has been getting significant snaps as the team's go-to punt returner. So do you hold on to 7 wide receivers? If you do that, you probably have to take away from another deep position group, like cornerback. And that's a risk right there. You might have to let go of a really good linebacker, and you're really deep and young there with some intriguing talent. Do you let go of an offensive lineman because you do have quality depth there, but just because you have to hold on to another wide receiver because of your indecision, you cut an offensive lineman, but that's maybe your most questionable position group on this entire team. And then you stick with the defense. You're a little bit light and unsure at the safety spot. Do you only hold on to 3 safeties on the opening 53-man roster? There are risks there, because if an injury happens, you're kind of screwed at the safety spot. So this roster construction with the initial 53 is going to be interesting, because they're going to have to be some gymnastics that the Niners maneuver here.
No question about it. Let's do a quick perusal of the roster, because this is kind of like the last real game. The third game's just for guys who are probably not going to be on the team. But if we just rolled it down, and I went through my roster the other day, but just a quick thumbnail. So let's just say they go 6 receivers. Okay, Ayuk, Debo, JJ, Pearsall, Cowing, and Conley. I could see them going 3 tight ends: Kittle, Sauerbert, and I'm thinking Mason Pline. But I threw out, would the Niners be interested in Chase Claypool as a movement tight end, who just got cut by the Bills the other day? They also have Braden Willis, but he just got destroyed as a blocker last week. Cam Latu's had a really bad camp. Tongas has had a great camp, but he's not considered much of a player. Pline's looked really good, but he's a rookie.
Barely played last week.
Yeah, didn't play at all last week. So I think they'll go 3 tight ends, with Kittle and Sauerbert being the first 2, and we'll see about the third. I think they go 3 quarterbacks, with Purdy, Brandon Allen. I kind of think there's a chance that if Dobbs is the third quarterback, that and Mordecai looks good either tonight or next week, that they could go with Mordecai and flip Dobbs to another team for a day 3 pick. And Minnesota could want him. He was just there. They just lost a quarterback in McCarthy. They have Darnold starting, but they don't have a backup of note. And then running back, you got CMC, and you got Mitchell, and you got Mason, and you got Breida, and Patrick Taylor, and Keyshawn Vaughn, and Cody Schrader, and Garendo, and you just got a lot of guys there, and Juszczyk, of course, as the fullback. So offensively, I could see, there being some debate about the running back, some debate about who the third quarterback's going to be, some debate about who the third tight end's going to be, some debate about who the backup offensive linemen are going to be, maybe some debate over wide receiver 6. But to me, the big debate on this team is at defensive line, because they put tons of emphasis into their defensive line.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to go with 10. 5 defensive tackles, 5 defensive ends. I think the 5 defensive tackles are Malik Collins, Javon Hargrave, Kevin Givens, Jordan Elliott. It was going to be Kalia Davis, right? But Kalia Davis is now out for half the year. So I think it's probably going to be Evan Anderson, who beats out Shaquille Brown, T.Y. McGill, and the new guy, Nick Williams, for that 5th tackle spot. That would just be my guess. But at the defensive end spot, you have Bosa, Floyd, Robert Beal, Yatir Gross-Matos. So you got 4 pretty decent guys there, but they don't have a 5th. And I think they need a 5th. I could see the 49ers, because they put so much value in D-line, trading for a defensive lineman at the cutdown. The name that I've seen DeMarvin Leal from Pittsburgh, who had another good preseason game yesterday against Buffalo. But the other intriguing name to me is Tyree Wilson. There's a lot of talk that the Raiders may part ways with Tyree Wilson. Would you give a day 2 pick in the 2025 draft to pluck Tyree Wilson, who was the 7th pick overall, off the Raiders? He's 6'6", 275. He's a defensive end. He doesn't have tons of moves. He's more of a bull rush guy. But we've seen Kasarik work magic with talented DNs in the past. Did it with Arden Keys, done it with other guys. Is Tyree Wilson worthy of the Niner reclamation project?
It would be a disaster for the Raiders if they moved off of him. I mean, they took him with the 7th pick in the 2023 draft out of Texas Tech, and he started his career at Texas A&M. I know you're an Aggies fan, and he is a fantastic athlete who is very raw as far as his pass rushing arsenal. He had a foot injury in the lead up to the draft that really limited him last year. And the big talk among Raiders fans is, I always hear our Raiders host talking about Tyree Wilson. When's he going to break out? When's he going to break out? Just because of where the Raiders drafted him, 7th overall, I don't think Las Vegas is going to move on from him this early, especially with the defensive coach in Antonio Pierce and a good defensive coordinator in Patrick Graham. I also think that Raiders team is going to be terrible offensively, so they're going to need as much defensive help as possible. But if they were to move off of Tyree Wilson, we have seen what Chris Kosera can do with Charles Omenihu, who didn't live up to expectations with the Texans. Arden Key, another high pick who flamed out with the Raiders. Cleveland Ferrell with the Raiders. Chris Kosera brings him into this defensive line development factory, and he's able to turn these players into really good players. So Tyree Wilson is a player who's 6'6", 275, fantastic athlete, who, if he comes to the Niners and Chris Kosera can kind of use him in that Arden Key, Charles Omenihu role, where he can play edge, has the size at 6'6", 275 to play defensive tackle. I think he can maximize a player like that. And the Niners do such a great job of developing raw and unproven and busted defensive linemen where he could become a really good player. But I just don't think the Raiders are in a spot where they're going to move off of a guy who they drafted 7th overall 2 drafts ago. But I do believe that the Niners are going to canvas the waiver market, and they're going to look at trade pieces, and they're going to look to bring in a defensive end or a defensive tackle, because I don't think the depth is good enough there. The starters are really good, but the depth is a huge concern.
Yeah, no, and this would be the time to invest. Why? Because you have a full arsenal of picks. You're inside your Super Bowl window. I like Darrell Taylor from Seattle. If he got cut, I like Joseph Osai, the former Texas Longhorn who's in Cincinnati. If he got cut, I like the idea of Tyree Wilson, especially if he gets cut. The Raiders would not be moving off of him unless they get a pick back. But the talk is that they may, if they get, offered a third-round pick, they may bite the bullet and just say, you know what, Tyree Wilson, will move you on. That he is the kind of bull-rushing talent that if the Niners did add him and he had a big year, that could be just enough to vault them over the top and into the Super Bowl and maybe into that 6th Lombardi. All right, it is time for our sponsor. This live stream sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. Use Better to make daily fantasy lineups and win real money. That's right. Check the link below in the description and download the app below. And make sure you use the promo code Niners, NINERS, to get the first deposit matched up to $250. All right, we go full screen mode here. We're going to take a look at some projections for tonight's game. Let's go Spencer Rattler. Let's see Spencer Rattler there. Spencer Rattler, where is he? There it is. Spencer Rattler has got 69.5 passing yards, more or less tonight. I like more.
Yeah, I like more as well.
Yeah, he had a good passing day the other day. So we go Spencer Rattler more. Okay. Do we pick another one, Kev? We'll pick another one here. What else do we have? Who do we like tonight? Jacob Cowing. Let's go Jacob Cowing. What's that one projection there? So he's got
more than 20.5 receiving yards.
Ooh. I'm going to go more. I think Jacob Cowing understands that he's a 4th-round pick, understands that he's kind of on the bubble, and knows he needs a showing to really solidify his spot. And I think he's going to solidify his spot. I think he has close to 50 yards receiving tonight. I like that over or more than 28.5 receiving yards. Is there another one that stands out to you, either Saints or Niners? Is there a player that you're looking for tonight?
Scroll down to the Niners there.
You got Ronnie Bell, you got Tay Martin, Trent Taylor, Cam Latu,
Jordan Mason. What's Jordan Mason there?
Let's check the Jordan Mason thing. Oh, yeah, 22.5 rushing yards. We're going more than that, right?
Yeah, you have to figure the Niners are going to play their starters a drive or two, and Jordan Mason had that many rushing yards just in the first drive alone last week.
Yeah. That means like 4 runs for that guy because he's averaging.
He's a shoo-in for 5 yards per carry every time he touches the rock.
5 carries, gets you over right there. 4 carries gets you over right there. He'll probably get 4 carries. Let's go one more. Let's go Tay Martin. Where's Tay Martin on this? What's Tay Martin at tonight?
26.
I like Tay Martin. Yards. I like Tay Martin. I'm going to go more than 26.5 receiving yards. You got to remember this. We only remember what actually shows up in the box score. But last week in that preseason game, if Dobbs just puts it on the money, Tay Martin beat his guy down the sideline for the game-winning touchdown.
Yeah, and
just threw it too far.
He dropped the long ball from Brandon Allen, which would have gotten him over that number.
He dropped the long ball from Brandon Allen, and that one was beyond his catch. If beyond his radius. If he had made those 2 catches, Chase, like me, we're looking at Tay Martin with over 100 receiving yards and the game-winning touchdown, and people are talking this week, not seriously, but they're talking somewhat, hey, wait a second, do they need Ayuk? They've got this Tay Martin guy. Or if nothing else, we would be talking about Tay Martin as the absolute bust-out player thus far of the preseason. Isn't it interesting how two passes make all the difference in the world?
Yep.
All right. So now we're going to pick we're gonna pick some money. Let's go 20. Can we go 20, Kev?
Let's do it.
We'll go 20, so we're gonna win up to 80. I like that.
4 times.
There you go. Once again, this live stream sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. Use Better to make daily fantasy lineups and win real money. Click the link below and in the description. You can read this. It's in the description, and then you can download the app below. Make sure you use the promo code Niners, NINERS, to get your first deposit matched up to $250. Don't go through with this and then forget to type in Niners. Make sure you type in Niners, NINERS, and you'll get your first deposit matched up to $250, thanks to Better for being a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. All right, couple more minutes with Chase Sr. as we talk Niners, Saints. One of the things I'm looking forward to tonight to watching is the Saints. I kind of feel like the 49ers need a defensive end. You already said it. You have them as needing a defensive end or tackle. I kind of like Evan Anderson, so I'm okay at tackle, but at defensive end, I think they really have a severe need. Now, here come the Saints, who literally, this is the deepest part of their football team. They have Cam Jordan. They have Carl Granderson. Okay, so those are their established defensive ends, and they're both really good. Then they signed Chase Young away from the Niners, so he's defensive end number 3. They have Peyton Turner, who was their first-round draft choice in 2021. They have Isaiah Foskey, who was their second-round draft choice last year from Notre Dame. They also have Tano Passigno from the Chiefs, who's on the PUP list, and then they added Trajan Jeffcoat out of Arkansas, who's a pretty decent player in his own right at defensive end, and they have another guy named Nico Lelos. But there's a lot of speculation that between Peyton Turner and Isaiah Foskey, that one of those guys may not make the Saints. And if you're the 49ers, I'm keeping, if you're a Niner fan, you're at this game tonight, keep an eye on number 98. That's Peyton Turner. Keep an eye on number 55. That's Isaiah Foskey. I think the Niners would like to have either one of those guys, whichever one the Saints don't want. I bet you the Niners would take and put on their roster. What do you think?
Yeah, there are parallels between San Francisco having an embarrassment of riches at wide receiver and then the Saints having the same problem at the defensive end spot. How many defensive ends do they have on that 53? 5, which then leads to a Peyton Turner or an Isaiah Foskey being the odd man out. And Foskey is a player who went to Notre Dame, was very, very productive there, was a second-round pick, 40th overall, so just outside of the first round, back in the 2023 NFL Draft. And this is why I was talking about this earlier, that the Niners are going to look at the waiver wire, and they're going to look at some of the players who are on the cusp of making the team or not making a team for the other 31 teams across the NFL. And they're looking at players like Peyton Turner, like Isaiah Foskey, who they reach out to New Orleans and they say, we know that you're going to have to make some difficult decisions at the defensive end position. What does it take for Foskey? 6th-round pick for a former 2nd-round pick? Can we get that done? We'll give you something instead of you letting him go, risking not being able to bring him back to the practice squad, and instead of getting nothing for him, you get some value back. We also know the Niners have mastered this compensatory pick formula. They have a lot of draft capital next year, and it's a smart way that they've operated their organization and being able to rack up these draft picks. So they could afford maybe a 5th-round pick for a player like Isaiah Foskey. So if one of those players pops tonight, San Francisco's on that other sideline. If I'm Kyle Shanahan, I'm looking up to John Lynch and saying, you seeing what Foskey's doing? You seeing what Turner's doing? You see how we have questions at defensive end as far as our depth goes? What does it take? Instead of that team letting a player go, let's trade a late-round pick for him. Let's take a shot knowing that we have arguably the best defensive line coach in the NFL on our side with Chris Kocurek.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. We know you cover the Eagles, so let's check in quickly on the Eagles. They beat the Patriots the other night 14-13. The Eagles are 2-0 in the preseason. The Eagles, they were down 10-3 going to the fourth quarter. And then they scored 11 points in the fourth quarter to win the game 14-3. But Tanner McKee, the Stanford quarterback, 15 of 19 for 140.
Yeah.
Kenny Pickett was 11 of 13 for 67 yards. They're battling out for number 2 quarterback. I thought that was kind of interesting. Ty Davis Price, the former Niner, went for 7 yards a carry. That caught my eye. And, all this talk about Brandon Ayuk and the Niner receiving core, the Eagles have Ayuk's best buddy, Joseph Nada from Clemson, who's also a kid from Rockland who trains with Ayuk. Nada is one of my favorites. He was targeted 5 times in this game. He caught all 5 of those balls for 88 yards. I know the Eagles have a high-profile wide receiver core, but I really like Joseph Nada for the Niners if he gets cut in Philly. And then I'm a former Stanford pregame host, and how about Thomas Booker? My goodness, Thomas Booker, 300 pounds, always super athletic, always super intriguing. He's putting it together. He had 3 tackles. He had a sack. He had a hit on the quarterback. He had a pass defense. He had a really nice day. What stood out or what is standing out so far about the Eagles in the preseason?
How Tanner McKee is so much better than Kenny Pickett. He throws with such great poise and anticipation and touch and accuracy toward that sideline. It's a really difficult throw to make because it's a long throw. And anytime that he's come in the 2 preseason games, the offense has been more efficient. The offense has moved down the field seamlessly. The offense just looks better because McKee is able to get rid of the ball faster. He's more decisive. And while Kenny Pickett has more experience and maybe more athleticism, it just seems so hard, and he doesn't push the ball downfield, limited arm strength. The only thing that's keeping McKee from winning QB2 is that he struggled a little bit in practice from time to time, whereas Pickett has performed better in practice. And then today, McKee threw a pick 6 and was a little bit off. But in the game, clearly looks like the better quarterback.
Oh, he's a bigger guy with a better arm with a smarter brain. I mean, he's a smarter guy with a better arm with, Tanner McKee throws accurate lasers.
Yeah. And I think that he could actually be like a decent starter in this league if he were to be given an opportunity. So I wonder if Philadelphia will maybe flip a Kenny Pickett to a Minnesota, flip a Tanner McKee. I think that they're going to hold on to the younger developmental player in McKee who has a lot of upside because you can never have enough talent in the quarterback room. So that stood out. Thomas Booker did have a good game, and Vic Fangio talked about him. Joseph Ngata does not create separation, but is a tall, physical wide receiver who, if you find that tight window and he can come down with that 50-50 ball, he can make plays downfield. So he's a really intriguing player. Philadelphia, they look pretty good. And I just think that the changes that they've made at the coordinator spots, they're just going to be a more well-coached football team, and that's just going to help them out dramatically.
Last question for you. Around the league, because, we're all fans, right? So we watch our teams, and you're watching Niners and Eagles, and you do an incredible job covering both. But just from your, being a football fan, just looking around the league, if I say to you, I'm not going to lead you in any direction for any player or any team, give me somebody you've seen this preseason that you're like, wow, look at that. It could be a star, it could be a no name. I have one for you. I can go first if you want to, give yourself 30 seconds to think of somebody.
I have a team that I think is sneaky in the NFC that is playing the Niners this year.
Who do you got?
Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
Caleb Williams looks good, and I know that he's going to have to make plays in structure. And I know that sometimes we can get out of control with the player comparisons. Those plays out of structure that he was making yesterday, and in week 1 against
27-3 over the Bengals after beating Buffalo the first week bad.
Right, and I know people are going to look at the QBR, whatever, man. Again, I'm not worried about the stats in the preseason. What do my eyes tell me? My eyes tell me that Caleb Williams could be really good right from the jump. And that's an offense that has DJ Moore. That's an offense that has DeAndre Swift, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, and they have a defensive head coach. Now, I don't think that Matt Eberflus is the long-term coach for Chicago, but Caleb Williams could save him his job. That team looks good. And the NFL is a league of parity where things change very, very quickly. And a last-place team could end up making the playoffs that next year. When the Niners take on Caleb Williams, I think that game against Chicago that we looked at as a for sure win when the schedule came out is going to be a difficult game because Caleb Williams is going to be a pain in the fucking ass to defend in the same way that Patrick Mahomes is, where now Patrick Mahomes is throwing passes behind his back where you think you have him bottled up. You think you have that play defended. And then the natural ability to just do something special leads to a backbreaking play that just takes the wind out of your sails. So it's Caleb Williams and the Bears that I think could be a playoff team this year if Matt Eberflus as their head coach doesn't completely flop. That team looks dangerous. They do.
Yeah, that's a good one. By the way, in that Bears-Bengals game yesterday for you Niner fans, Dante Pettis, 3 catches, 53 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 targets, 3 receptions. Maybe Dante Pettis will save his career. I'm also going to go with a Hard Knocks team, but you're going with the Bears. I'm going to go with the New York Giants. The New York Giants signed 2 guys that I was really excited that they signed, are really excited to watch. One was this Dante Miller, who's a super fast little running back. I don't think he played yesterday. But the other one is a defensive lineman from SMU named Elijah Chapman.
Okay.
And this guy is 6 feet tall, 280 pounds. And
he ran down the running back, right?
He ran down the running back the other day.
I saw Kev tweet about that.
He had a sack in the first game. This is one of the greatest athletes at 6 feet, 280. I don't know if he's I did a video on him in the springtime when I ran into him looking through some of the SMU film. This guy's a player, man. And he's just not the right size. Now, he's an NFL athlete. I don't know what position he's going to play. You know, is he a defensive tackle? He's a little small. Is he a defensive end? I'm not sure. Is he an inside linebacker? Is he a fullback? I don't know what he is. But he's 6 feet, 280, and super fast, super incredible. And he ran down a running back this week. And if you can check him out, he was wearing number 94 for the New York Giants, Elijah Chapman. And my buddy who's back there says he is not a lock to make the team. So you might see him get put through waivers. John Lynch, get Elijah Chapman. I mean, seriously, that guy's incredible.
How about Absolutely Daniel Jones yesterday? He looked horrendous.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny. Did you watch Hard Knocks when Joe Shane is sitting around the room with the guys and he's like, so guys, we've decided we're going to go with Daniel Jones for another year and maybe get him a weapon. And I've never heard a room full of less enthusiasm. Yeah. Everybody's just like, yeah.
It's our only option. 40 million per year.
It's a lot of deep breathing because that guy's just constantly hurt. And is there anybody who turns the ball over at a more mind-numbing rate than Daniel Jones?
No. Carson Wentz back in the day after his knee injury, but they just make mind-numbingly bad decisions with the football.
Yep, no question. There you go. And MF says, heard Larry chopping it up on KMBR yesterday. Yep, my new radio home. I'm back on the Sports Leader. Check me out later today. I'll be on the pregame show at 3 o'clock with the boys. I'll join them for the postgame show, and then afterwards I'll do my own Krug Show postgame show. Chase, what do you have going? More importantly, before we ask you what you got going, let's read these star chats. Then we'll ask you. CW says, I really like Tatum Bethune. I think he has a for sure future. I agree. Rivera_Niners trade Elijah Mitchell to the Cowboys for Trey Lance.
He looked okay last night. He did.
Man, the Cowboys could use Elijah Mitchell. Do not trade the Cowboys a running back. That's all they need. I'm old Greg. Come on, Larry. You know you can't be calling those guys glass already. Didn't Ricky play every college game? Love you dudes.
I'm old Greg.
Hey, I'm old Greg. I'm going to call it like I see it. And if those guys want to stop being glass, they can get on the practice field and practice. Don't tell me, this is high school. Don't bust out your junior high resume. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Hey, you know what? I did good in pre-algebra. That's great. That ain't helping you. It's high school. It's, you know what I'm saying? It's like that. What you did in college doesn't help here. James Foster, 49ers trading DeForest Buckner at the deadline and winning the Super Bowl.
I think the Colts are going to be good, so I don't think they trade him away.
I don't think that's going to happen. Chase, what do you got cooking? Will you be imbibing? Will you be shotgunning? Will you be in mid-season form for preseason action? Or are you going to keep it, are you going to temper it down, keep it toned down a little bit tonight?
A couple things. The
audience needs to know.
I listened to a couple of your radio appearances on KNBR. The Billy Martin reference had me laughing out loud.
Thank you.
That was pretty good.
Yes.
Because it's your third
stint.
So that was funny.
Hired, fired in controversy, rehired, incredible decade, fired or laid off in a budget crunch, now back. Third stint.
I love it. They just can't quit you and you can't quit them. But honestly, good stuff. It's a different I like going on your show because I can just kind of like play co-host and we can just like chop it up. I always enjoy hearing people who are hosts like you and I who are in that guest role. So I think your appearances have been awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with the show starting September?
Yep, Labor Day, 6 to 7 West Coast, which will be 9 to 10 East Coast. Check it out. Everybody check out my brand new show on KNBR. It's called Niners Nightly. I'll be in Santa Clara all throughout the day. We'll interview players, coaches, media people, content creators, fans. We'll take calls. We'll mix it up. We'll do video. We're going to do a bunch of stuff. So, yeah, Monday through Friday. That's your Niners spot on KNBR, 6 to 7 every single night. And we'll even do a Saturday show starting in the regular season leading in day before the game.
Yeah, so again, congrats there. You're doing good stuff.
Thanks,
there. As far as me, I put out my top players to watch, Niners, Saints. That's up on the 49ers report. We'll be going live tonight, an hour before the game, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific for a watch party. We'll do a pregame show during the game, live play-by-play, instant reaction, audience interaction. It's going to be a lot of fun. Do a post-game show as well. So join me in a few hours on the 49ers report.
Join Chase. They do it big up on the on Chat Sports. I mean, you guys, how many total hours on game day do you guys provide on Chat Sports for the Niners? And do you? Well, how do you divvy it up like Niners Eagles? I guess in the preseason it's easy, huh?
Yeah, differences in schedules are obviously key. What's crazy this year is that the Niners and Eagles do not have a single overlapping game the entire regular season. So I'll be able to do watch parties for every game on both channels. As far as how long I'm live for, go an hour before the game for a pregame show, and then we're live for the entire game, and then we probably do like a half-hour postgame show. So for instance, Niners Titans was 4 hours and 17 minutes live. Sometimes the live streams can be 5 hours. Sometimes on a game day, I'm legitimately live for 9 to 10 hours straight if I'm doing back-to-back watch parties. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of energy exhausted, but it's an awesome job, and I absolutely love it.
There you go. And when he's not in studio, he's going on long runs and doing videos while in full sweat.
And I'm getting the weight up. Let's go.
Look at that. Look at that. Yeah. Pit. Nobody brings pit stains.
I was working out right before this. I had to get the sweat going. Let's go.
There you go. On our way out the door, once again, this live stream sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. Use Better to make daily fantasy lineups and win real money. Click the link below in the description. Download the app below and make sure you use the promo code Niners to get the first deposit matched up to $250. Check me out. I'll be at the stadium tonight, 6 or 3 o'clock on the radio. Check out Chase and Chat Sports doing fantastic work. For Chase, I'm Larry. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get